Hey, I'm Bryan Jones from Jones Pierce Architects. I'm here with Doug Furhman, the builder on this project. We're at Kennebec neighborhood on Lake Martin, Alabama. We're at a point in the project where I came over to talk to Doug today, and we had in our specifications a couple of products that are you might not have seen before, but have kind of evolved into a standard that we use at this point. And this is super boring stuff, but it does pay off in the end, and you'll be thankful you do it this way. What we do for houses now is we want to get a tight envelope on the house. Like the outside of the house, we don't want we don't want a lot of air leaking through the outside of the house. So by code in Alabama, you have to have 5 air changes an hour or under. So that's just a measurement of how leaky the house is. So we've been using a system that's kind of interesting. It's called Zip System, and it's the green board back here. And it's sheathing, but it has a layer of the air barrier. That's this green part. So instead of, if you've seen a house with the white sheets that are usually flapping in the breeze, that's supposed to be the air barrier. And then you can tell the way it flaps, it never is the air barrier. So this product, we've been using it probably for the last 10 years, and it's kind of evolved into our standard practice for a couple of reasons. One is you don't have the flapping in the breeze. You leave on Friday and the wind comes over the weekend and it tears up. Eliminate that problem. It also goes up in one step. So the framer will actually place this on the wall, they're gone. So what we're doing on this job that Doug's helping us with, it's a little bit different. Usually contractors rely on the framer to put this tape. They tape up all the joints, and they're supposed to tape up everything. On this project, and on other jobs, we've seen the framers don't really want to do this. It's not really what they're good at. They're good at putting stuff up and leaving. And so what we're doing on this project is the framer is actually putting the tape on, but then Doug has another group coming we're using a liquid applied flashing for everywhere that's hard, hard to make it tight. So, at the edges, between any joint, between the concrete and the bottom of this joint, it's always hard to air seal. And then at the top where it touches the roof. So they're going to use this liquid product, and it's like super sticky, and you put it on with a little trowel, and it's labor intensive, and you have to be meticulous. Okay, so let's talk about just why houses are tight and what the benefit is. In the South, it's humidity. So there's lots of moisture outside your house that's trying to get inside your house. And so you want to keep that out. The reason you want to keep it out is if you let it in, then all of a sudden your air conditioner runs and makes it cooler, but it also takes the moisture out of your house. So if you can keep it out, the air conditioning doesn't have to work as hard. So what we actually do, and then the other thing, if you have a tight house, is we need to make sure that we have outside air coming into the house. You have to regulate that. So what we've been doing it's pretty advanced, but also super comfortable for the people who own the houses when they live in the house, is we use a whole house ventilating dehumidifier. And we'll actually bring air through a dehumidifier, and it'll dump the air into the supply of the air conditioner. And they're coordinated so when the dehumidifier is running, the air conditioner's not running, so they won't run at the same time. And you can set your humidity level, set it at whatever, between 40 and 50%, and then all of a sudden, because of the way you feel moisture and temperature go together to be comfortable, if you're comfortable or not, you can raise your set point to probably 75, and then you can experiment with that. What that'll do is your air conditioner runs less, and it saves money. So at the end of this deal, we've had some houses that their power bills are $100 for a big house. And people, half the time we don't even tell people what we're doing. And all of a sudden I'll get a call and say, wow, my bill's $100. And we say, yeah, that's great. But anyway, it's just part of building a quality house for us. And it's kind of the building science part that, I probably ignored in college, but learning now, but I'm really kind of nerding out on this stuff lately.
Hey, I'm Doug Furhman with Southern Traditions Construction. Bryan has kind of covered some of the aspects of this technology and this system that's used to make a house airtight. I'm going to speak more toward the methodology of the tactics of how that gets installed. Bryan alluded to, we've got the the 4x8 sheets of the zip system sheathing that comes pre-treated with the air barrier. Those are applied by our framer during the course of the rough framing activities. After that, the flat joints around the house are taped with just a standard, sticky tape system that's manufactured by this same company. So that happens at all of the flat joints. But you also have inside corners and outside corners. The inside corners and outside corners are best treated with a liquid flashing product that's produced by the same manufacturer. And it serves to fill the gaps much more effectively than the tape. It's very difficult to make the tape system lay down on an inside corner. So it's much more effective in regard to controlling the air tightness of the house to use the liquid flashing system. So that's used at the inside corners, outside corners. And one key joint that's very important as far as making the house airtight is at the base of the house where it meets your foundation system. So at the bottom of the wall, the foundation, where the sheathing meets the foundation system, it's almost impossible to do anything with tape at the bottom of the wall. So that's a joint that really needs to be liquid flashed. So we'll apply 3 beads of liquid flashing down there, and it smooths out with a trowel that's also provided. And that really creates an airtight seam there at the bottom of the sheathing. And then another key component, that when you get to the top of these walls where the walls meet the roof structure, there's a joint there that is also very difficult to do anything with tape, and it also needs to be done with liquid flashing. So that's as far as the sheathing goes, that's the main components. There's also a stretch tape that's used at window openings to really help you with the seal of the window opening, and then up the sides of the jambs of the window opening to really create a nice tight barrier there for any moisture that might get around those window openings. So that's the pieces and parts, and that's typically done most effectively by a crew that comes in after the framer. Let the framer continue on with his operation, getting the house structure pulled together, and then bring in a separate crew to manage these little detail pieces that are so important to having an airtight house. And then once all that's complete, what we'll do to kind of measure how effective we were during that process, Bryan's going to come back in. We're going to have a day a little bit later in the process. Once the windows and doors are installed, we'll have what's called a blower door test. So Bryan will come back then, and we'll arrange some equipment to be able to force air into the house. And Bryan also has some equipment that will apply some smoke inside the house, so that when that air is forced inside the house, that smoke and air will come out any holes or gaps that are still allowing air to escape. So it'll be very easy to see where you might have deficiencies in the installation of the products. So at that point in time, before you get so far down the road that you can't do anything about it, you'll be able to come back and make corrections, add some liquid flashing or tape or various other little pieces and parts to make sure that you're as airtight as you can be. I think it's very effective on an addition, because most of the time when you're adding on to an existing house, you're going to have to add more heating and cooling for those spaces, probably separate units to handle that additional space. So it's very effective when you use on an addition like that that's much more square footage that might be added onto a home. It can help you control those HVAC initial costs, and then, as Bryan alluded to, maybe some long-term benefits with your heating and cooling bills.
So one additional benefit Doug was talking about, the blower door test, is the interesting thing is we're doing that before insulation, which is not traditionally done at that point. Usually it's done at the end of the job when you don't have a chance to fix anything. So there's a couple of benefits doing it then at that point. One, Doug can go around and fix all the holes that you can't see because it's hard to get everything. And the smoke allows you to see it and fix it. Two is we can we'll get a measurement of how tight the house is, and then before your HVAC contractor does their, it's called a manual J, but they'll do an energy model for your house to figure out how big the air conditioner is. What typically happens, so you don't call them later when you're hot, they'll put it in a fudge factor, which makes the systems run less efficiently. They may short cycle, lots of things could happen. So if we have a measurement that we can say, okay, our air tightness of the house is 1 air change an hour, or whatever it is, they can really dial in the design of the mechanical systems and just use a smaller system is the benefit, use less energy. So that's interesting too. So, okay, let's talk about cost of this and how far, where to stop, because there's a priority list. This is probably basic stuff. Ceiling and zip wall is probably not that much, $2,000 or $3,000 on a big project is not a lot of money for this, for long-term benefit. Your next step is to decide to do a dehumidifier or not, because you can bring in outside air and don't temper it through a dehumidifier and satisfy code, or you can do a dehumidifier. The dehumidifiers we use are independent units. Depending on the size of the house, they'll take out 90 to 150 quarts of water a day. They're going to be, the equipment itself is like $4,000, something like that, plus installation. But the benefit is your comfort. I've had so much good feedback from clients that they set the humidity at where they're comfortable. The house feels great. You don't have that cold, wet feeling that you sometimes feel in the summer. That's because it's too humid. And people keep turning down their air conditioner and it gets more cold, more wet. So the dehumidifier totally, it eliminates that problem. It also eliminates any potential problem with mold or anything, because mold grows at like 70%. I don't know exactly, but it's in that range. And you don't have to worry about it. There's no call about, to me, it's like belt and suspenders, it's over. You've made your house, as tight as it's going to be, and you've controlled the humidity and outside air, and it's a great way to live in a house. I get a lot of good feedback about it.
I asked Bryan, what about these manufacturers of HVAC equipment that are making all-in-one units that have the dehumidification built into their systems that already handle temperature control?
Okay, so we deal with that question. I think you can deal with it kind of a cost analysis, because our theory is that if you put it in a dehumidifier, which is call it $4,000, you may be able to use like a 2-stage air conditioner instead of a continuous variable volume, and it may be a lower SEER that you don't have to pay for the high SEER, all the technology. And you can just weigh the cost of all that. Like, what is the super duper expensive system cost that does everything versus maybe a middle level system, AC system, and the dehumidifier. Right. And just make your own decision. Okay.
If you want to know more about Southern Traditions construction, you can certainly reach out to me, Doug Furhman. The best way to reach me is either via email or phone. Email is stcalabama@gmail.com, and the phone's 334-531-3914.
And if you want to talk about, we call our first step viability, determining the viability of the project of your new house. So happy to do a consultation. We can do those very well over Zoom now, and we can almost do all our work by Zoom now. But that's a great way to have a first call. You can pull up your property. We can look at it on the computer from satellite. Our first step is kind of to analyze like how big cost at the beginning is about how big the house is. So we can kind of dial in how big the house needs to be and talk to you about cost and architecture fees and all that stuff. And we use a step-by-step process, 3 steps of design, pricing, and final drawing. So you kind of manage the design and the pricing as you go. It's the best way to do it. It's jonespierce.com.